Hello everyone, this is Joshua Smith of Apollo's Artifacts. It is July 2018. Following up on the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto that we covered before, next I thought we would move on to the 45 Goals of Communism. This was found in a book from 1958 written by W. Cleon Skousen, who was an FBI agent. The book was called The Naked Communist, and that was because supposedly he was stripping down communism to its basics, revealing from their meetings, which he had sat in on, what it was that they set out that they wanted to do over time. And apparently he observed these personally. He was working for the FBI as an infiltrator into various communist groups that were working against the United States. And he put together these 45 goals that they had set out through the various meetings, and eventually this was read into the Congressional record in 1963. Over the years, The Naked Communist has been a very popular book. It has sold millions of copies. There's actually been a follow-up by, I think, another family member of his called The Naked Socialist, which sort of portrays a similar approach to how socialists want to institute those and how many of these various socialist goals are already in place in the United States. As I go over these, some of them I will have commentary, others I'll just read them and move on to the next one. This was again in 1963 in the House of Representatives. However, before I begin, I would just like to point out that Mr. Skousen has been slandered many times by the media. Even back in the 1960s, you had members of the media and academia who accused him of being a far right-winger, an ultra-right-wing nationalist, a conspiracy theorist, all of the typical stuff that they like to throw around, anything that gets anybody off of their trail of suspicion. Don't look over here at us. We're not really up to anything at all. We're not bringing about any of these changes. Look at that crazy guy over there. He's the bad one. He's the dangerous one. They're always doing that, always throwing out like these smoke bombs so that they can escape behind the smoke and whatnot and say, nothing to see here, nothing of interest. Move along. And so we will begin in 1963. These were known as the current communist goals. Number 1, U.S. acceptance of coexistence as the only alternative to atomic war. 2, U.S. willingness to capitulate in preference to engaging in atomic war. 3. Develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. 4. Permit free trade between all nations regardless of communist affiliation and regardless of whether or not the items being sold could be used for war. 5. Extension of long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites, which would artificially prop them up for longer than they should be, which is exactly what did happen in many cases. 6. Provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist domination. Again, that one happened as well. 7. Grant recognition of Red China, admission of Red China to the UN. 8. Set up East and West Germany as separate states in spite of Khrushchev's promise in 1955 to settle the German question by free elections under supervision of the UN. 9. Prolong the conferences to ban atomic tests because the United States has agreed to suspend tests as long as negotiations are in progress. 10. Allow all Soviet satellites individual representation in the UN. 11. Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one-world government with its own independent armed forces. Some communist leaders believe the world can be taken over as easily by the UN as by Moscow. Sometimes these two centers compete with each other, as they are now doing in the Congo. 12. Resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. It is very interesting that the Communist Party USA still exists even now, and the Democratic Socialist Party as well, and both of them seem to have an outsized impact, and they have very interesting connections into the Democratic Party, which I'm planning to cover in another episode. I've recently been looking into that and seeing how many of these people like Keith Ellison and Van Jones and Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders have direct connections with these communists and socialists even now. 13. Do away with all loyalty oaths. 14. Continue giving Russia access to the U.S. Patent Office. 15. Capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. Gee, I wonder which one that would have been. 16. Use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. 17. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. 18. Gain control of all student newspapers. 19. Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. 20. Infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policy-making positions. 21. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. 22. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. 23. Control art critics and directors of art museums. Our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsive, meaningless art. And we've seen quite a bit of that. 24. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. And of course, it's really interesting now to see that the left has ascended and has so much control over free speech issues and how they want to eliminate that for all of their opponents. They used it on the way up to attain power. Now they want to close it off, that they've gotten these significant positions of power to block others from rising against them. 25. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. 26. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, healthy. 27. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion, discredit the Bible, and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. End quotes. 28. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the ground that it violates the principle of, quote, separation of church and state, which of course was in a letter of Jefferson to the Danbury group, the Danbury Baptist Association. 29. Discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. That would be where you have these people who, as I was taught all throughout school, K through 12, it was that the Constitution needed to be seen as a living, breathing document, one that needed to be open to change, and a document that was just so circumscribed by its times that they had no idea what things would come in the future. And basically, it's outmoded and outdated, and we don't really need it anymore, which is really important in terms of the Supreme Court, where you have this conflict between, do you go with the originalists, the people who have a more traditional interpretation of the Constitution, who try to look at it the way that the Founding Fathers would have seen it, and then interpret whatever specific cases before them in light of that, versus the people who want to basically create new laws from the bench based upon their votes. 30. Discredit the American Founding Fathers, present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the, quote, common man. 31. Belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history on the ground that it was only a minor part of the, quote, big picture. Give more emphasis to Russian history since the communists took over. And I think that means if they teach Russian history, they should primarily teach what happened after the communists or whatever, so that they would, I suppose, discredit pre-communist Russian history or something like that, and talk about that the czars were really evil and horrible right-wing people or something like that, maybe. In terms of belittle all forms of American culture, discourage the teaching of American history, well, they have eliminated so much of that over time. I mean, you used to have so many specific history courses, and then they started watering those down. They watered down civics. You actually used to be taught civics, and they melded all of this together in social science, and then it just became this huge mess, and I don't even know what they have now. 32. Support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics, etc. 33. Eliminate all laws or procedures which interfere with the operation of the communist apparatus. 34. Eliminate the House Committee on Un-American Activities. 35. Discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. Comey and Mueller did quite the job on the FBI there recently. 36, infiltrate and gain control of more unions. 37, infiltrate and gain control of big business. 38, transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies. Treat all behavioral problems as psychiatric disorders which no one but psychiatrists can understand or treat. 39, dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who oppose communist goals. 40, discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. 41, emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of their parents, attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of their parents. 42, create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition, that students and special interest groups should rise up and use their united force to solve economic, political, or social problems. 43, overthrow all colonial governments before native populations are ready for self-government. 44, internationalize the Panama Canal. 45, repeal the Connolly Reservation so the United States cannot prevent the formation of a world court. And I would suppose they're not referring to the International Court of Justice at The Hague, which sometimes is called the World Court. He means some other kind of a superordinate body, I suppose, that would work with the UN or be under the auspices of the UN or something like that, perhaps. I'll, of course, link all of the sources for this below. I'll link also a part to Amazon where you can buy the book, The Naked Communist, and also a follow-up book, The Naked Capitalist, and then the third one not written by Mr. Skousen, but by another member of his family, The Naked Socialist. And you can make your own judgment about how many of these you think have actually been put into place. I just thought it was something really interesting to follow up the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto with, especially as we've seen this rise to prominence of Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic Socialist of America person who's in the Democratic Party, and basically the head of the DNC, Perez, and the former co-chair, Keith Ellison. They have said that this is the future of the Democratic Party, is basically full-on, full-bore socialism right there in your face. And they are unapologetic about it, but these people simply do not understand economics. If you want to start to understand economics, get Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. It is not perfect, but it is probably the best overall intro to understanding how a free market economy operates and how it ideally should operate, with fewer and fewer government interferences, as few as possible. That's the way I would like it to be. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. I need the help here. I'd like to grow the channel a bit more. Thank you.